Hey everyone, I'm Brittany from Quarter Acre Roots, where we talk about growing a lot on a little bit of space, and today we are talking about all of my growing goals for this growing season. My overarching goals for this year are not like specific harvest amounts or weights or anything like that. Instead, I just want to focus on making my space feel really intentional and full instead of overwhelming and cramped. Definitely feel free to check out the chapters below to skip ahead to different parts of this video. If you're not interested in some parts but interested in the other, feel free to navigate around. The first thing we're going to be talking about is maximizing vertical growing space. The second is continuing to work on building up a functional pollinator ecosystem. The third is continuing to build out our perennial fruit guilds. The fourth is replacing store-bought herbs completely. And the fifth is improving our soil so that next year we will not have to buy any bagged compost. So with those things in mind, let's get started first talking about how we are going to be maximizing our vertical gardening this year. We have always tried to focus largely on vertical gardening and growing up instead of out, just because it is a smaller space. But this year we are really adding a few things to help maximize our space and just make things look a little bit prettier. So this right here is an American groundnut. You can see a tiny little green stem poking out. This is a native vining perennial, and it's called a groundnut because the tubers are edible. So anything that's going to be native and perennial and edible is great because it typically means it's going to be pretty drought tolerant, and I'm not going to have to do a ton of stuff with it. So this is the archway trellis that I put up for the American groundnut. I am likely going to plant it in the ground over here and then let it climb all the way up. And I do have two different tubers, so I may plant one on each side and let them kind of climb up each side. And this is just like a cheap trellis. I think this one was just from Amazon or something. I'm trying not to order a lot from Amazon, but I could not find anything locally, and I could not find anything that wasn't super expensive to meet the need of what I wanted to do here. I did not want to use a cattle panel trellis here. I definitely wanted to use something that looked a little bit more intentional to start this garden area. So this was like $20, and what I ended up doing was when I put it together, you can see here, I used one of those like welding glues. It's like an epoxy glue that you mix into two parts. It's super strong. I used that on each of these joints before putting the screws in, and I left 4 of the joints, so this one here, and then the corresponding ones on the other side. I left those glue free so that in the winter, when I chop down the vine, I can separate this into 3 larger pieces and store it in the shed to hopefully get more life out of this trellis. I don't want it to rust a ton. Some of the reviews were a little bit mixed on that, so I'm hoping to take it inside for the winter to store it. If it does develop bad rust or anything, I'll probably just spray paint it next year with something to help stop and cover the rust. And since this is a little bit flimsy, what I ended up doing was taking 4 shorter T-fence posts here, which I already had from just past projects around the yard, and I drove those into the ground and then zip tied the trellis to the T-fence posts in a couple of areas. So once this whole new pond area is planted and landscaped, I am really looking forward to seeing how beautiful this looks. I really think that American groundnuts are really pretty plants. They have a really lush green foliage and some pretty flowers. Plus, I'm just looking forward to having something that is lower maintenance and edible. Hey, Henry. You gonna show him the cattle panel trellis here? Henry is checking out our catmint resprouting here. I haven't done my spring yard cleanup yet, but we can see some of this stuff peeking through, and he loves coming over and laying in this catmint. This is our cattle panel trellis, which is a very similar concept to the trellis I just showed you guys. This one is just a standard 16-foot cattle panel. We have it folded into an arch here and then zip tied again to our metal fence T-posts here. This one was one of the first things that we put in the yard, and it has held up extremely well. We have not taken this down or moved it or anything. We will keep this one for another year. This year I already have some sugar snap peas growing here, and then when those are nearing the end of their life, I will likely put some green beans on here. Maybe I'll add in some butterfly peas. They have like blue flowers. It's an annual pea, and it's not for producing edible pods, but the blue flowers are highly pigmented and you can use them to dye things, which I think is really cool, especially because it's kind of rare that you see a blue flower. I feel like I don't encounter them as much. So I'll probably be throwing those in all around the garden for areas where I'm not growing anything edible or perennial. Continuing our tour of vertical growing solutions here, I did a video all about assembling this bean trellis, which was admittedly like kind of an impulse purchase online, but the reviews were really excellent, saying it lasted for a really long time. People had had it for many years. So I have this just in a couple pieces right now because I haven't decided exactly where I'm going to put it in the yard, but it has a large circular metal bottom here that is held in place using these clips. And then there's a stake on the bottom. So you drive it down to like right about here. And then it obviously has the pole. And then it has this circle that sits on top. I'll back it up so you guys can see exactly how this ends up looking. So once you drive this into the ground, you take twine and run it in a zigzag pattern all around. So it ends up being this just really beautiful pyramid. So a lot of people will grow pole beans on this. That is probably what I will be growing on it as well. After I get all of my spring bushes and trees planted, then I will probably decide where this is gonna go. It might even go in the front because my trees there are so young that I kind of need like a large focal piece, and this will be really pretty when it's covered in beautiful vines. And this will certainly save a lot of space compared to growing all bush beans. I know some people prefer bush beans over pole beans. They think they're a lot easier to harvest. I like bush beans too. I probably will have some bush beans growing around my yard, but when space is at a premium, I like to be growing things like pole varieties of vegetables as well so that I can have them growing up. I will throw up some footage of how we used bamboo poles last year too. It's too early for us to have out our pole cherry tomatoes yet, but I did use some fire cured bamboo poles last year. You don't have to fire cure your bamboo poles, but the whole reason I fire cured ours was to bring out the resins in the bamboo culms to make them stand up more to the elements. So here is a look at one of the bamboo poles that we fire cured last year. I just used a propane torch to do this, and I definitely did find that the ones that I fire cured have a harder, more durable surface on the outside. They did not crack up and down the bamboo culm, which is really nice too. The ones that I just let air dry outside ended up, as they dried, getting these large cracks in them, which again is not the end of the world, but I think that these will probably not last as long as the culms that I fire cured. So I'm just going to be reusing these same poles that I used last year for our cherry tomatoes. Last year, what I did was I did a true pole method with our cherry tomatoes. So I put several poles into a raised bed, and then as the tomatoes grew, I pruned all of the suckers off and I tied them up to the poles. So it was a very clean, very tidy way of growing tomatoes, though it was very labor intensive because I had to make sure I stayed on top of pruning off all of those suckers. And because I did not let the tomatoes go like super crazy, I got less of a production than I have in years past, though the fruit that I did get was way easier to harvest because I wasn't having to like go diving into the tomato bushes. So this year I'm going to use the similar bamboo pole approach, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit. Instead of just having one main stem, what I'm going to do is a combination method of the tall, super tall bamboo poles and a Florida weave twine method. So I can let maybe one or two of the suckers on each of the plants grow into their own plant and then support them on some sort of Florida weave type system. I find that a Florida weave type system is not enough support for a large, like completely unruly tomato. Like you need to do some pruning. I'm just looking to expand that a little bit this year beyond just using the poles by hopefully having those extra twines in a Florida weave to help me let some of those suckers grow out. So hopefully that makes sense. If you're new to growing tomatoes, just know that there's not a ton of stuff you need to know. You will hear a lot of people talk about all of the different ways to grow tomatoes and all the things that you have to do and that you should never do. But in reality, like a lot of it is about preference. And my preference is just to keep them tidier, grow them up, and prune off a lot of the suckers to keep them from getting too bushy. While I was in the back of the yard, I also forgot to show you guys the spot I decided on for my Titan squash tunnel. I ordered the Titan squash tunnel from Gardener Supply Store, and I got this because we are tall people and it just gets kind of crowded in a lot of growing tunnels, especially our cattle panel trellis that we have. Once it gets really full of plants, it can be kind of hard to like get in there and harvest. So I'm not going to be growing a squash on here. Loofah is related to squash, but I am going to be growing loofah on this. This whole area where you see this hose running is where we are going to edge this out and expand this mulched bed. So this will be plantable space here that I am planning to amend with compost. I am planning to do one loofah plant on this side, and then I haven't decided what I want to do on this side yet. And then hopefully once I get the netting over it and the plants get going, it won't stick out as such a sore thumb back here. It kind of looks like a little bit out of place, but I think it's going to look really pretty back here once all the vines are climbing up the tunnel. It's going to look amazing. I just know it. I've also put all of these green powder coated A-frame trellises all around our yard. I typically use these for things like vining cucumber plants and for anchoring my smaller bush tomatoes and kind of just tying them up to keep them up off the soil. I'll probably use them for sweet potatoes too. We usually put our sweet potatoes over here in this bed where I currently have garlic, but sweet potatoes are an incredibly space-intensive vegetable to grow. So what I will likely be doing is putting 2 of them in here to just kind of lift some of that foliage up off the ground to prevent it from running like all the way over here and obscuring the paths and stuff like that, because sweet potatoes are definitely a non-negotiable for us to be growing. It's something that we definitely prioritize because we love to eat it, and it's something that once cured can be shelf stable for many, many months into the fall and over the winter. And for the last vertical thing I want to talk about today, we are going to be talking about our green stalks. So I have a recent video on how I filled up the green stalk back here, the purpley pink one with our cool weather crops, and how I was going to be filling up my new yellow one, which I got. I love it, completely with strawberries. This is the 7-tier leaf in lemon. GreenStalk did send me this one. I have purchased some of my own GreenStalks. It's a great company. It is a great solution for small space growers because what this lets you do is grow a ton of plants. So there's 7 tiers here and there are 6 growing pockets on each of the tiers. So that gives you a total of 42 plant pockets to grow 42 different plants in 2 square feet of space. So as you can see, I've got it here on our concrete greenhouse patio. I love having it here. I'm going to be installing the irrigation system for it this year to help automate some of it because I am a bit of a lazy gardener and I struggle sometimes with container gardens, keeping up with watering them. So I'm looking forward to doing that this year, but this has all strawberries in it. So I think it's gonna look really, really pretty when it's cascading down. And I'm hoping that I will also be able to keep the birds away from this a little bit more than I would when the strawberries were in the grounds. When they were growing in the grounds over around the asparagus, the asparagus eventually would shade it out as the asparagus got bigger and we had to let it fern out. It was good early in the season, but then the plants kind of suffered because it just created so much shade, letting the plants fern out. With this, I will be able to monitor it, I will be able to rotate it and give them a lot of sun, and I am looking forward to seeing how this specific variety will do its first year. I love my green stalks so much. I actually ended up buying a second one. I got the pink lemonade one. This one isn't going to be completely full of strawberries, but it is going to have probably about half strawberries in it. I did a ton of chamomile starts this year, so I'm going to try and alternate like chamomile and strawberries in these. And while I have them out, I'm gonna put a couple more strawberry starts in this to show you guys how nice it is to plant the strawberries in here. I really like the leaf for strawberries because you need less robust of a space for the less robust root system for your strawberries. And when you're planting your strawberries in your green stalk, there are very few things you need to remember. The only thing that I do recommend when you're planting your strawberries in your green stalk is to do 1 plant per pocket, because if you've ever grown strawberries, you know they're gonna multiply and they're gonna run fast. They're gonna pop off runners and propagate themselves, and that is how they spread and stay alive. You might think it looks really empty when you put 1 bare root strawberry in each pocket, but what will end up happening is that will be the perfect spacing and the perfect sizing for when your plants start getting bigger and they start producing. And there is one thing that GreenStalk is coming out with this year that I am super excited about. It's called the Strawberry Cup, and it's actually shaped like an actual strawberry, and it clips on to the outside of this. They are sending me one in the mail, which I will definitely show you guys when I get it. I'm gonna do a whole video about growing strawberries in a green stalk. And the whole reason they are releasing the Strawberry Cup is because, like I mentioned, you wanna have 1 strawberry plant in each of these plant pockets, and they will still run. And if you're growing them in a container like this, those runners may reroot themselves in these pockets, which you may want in 1 year. It probably isn't gonna get that crowded, but you don't want them to keep running over and over and over all in here. Eventually they will crowd out the space and then your production may suffer. If you have never severed strawberry runners before, I do have a video I can link below about how to do that. And the little strawberry cup that GreenStalk is releasing is so that you can take those runners when they come off of your plants in the pockets, and you can gently set them down into soil in the little cup that clips onto the edge of the pocket and root that runner. So then when the runner is rooted, you can just snip off that little stem connecting the two strawberry plants, the mother and baby, if you will, and then you can plant the strawberry plant up separately. Here's what the first tier I planted with strawberries looks like already. It's already looking like it's ready to get some blooms, which is very exciting. So I'm just gonna put these tiers back together and then we can move on beyond vertical gardening to our next topic. So let's move on to talking about our separate goal here, which is building up a functional pollinator support system in our yard. Now, I am not a flower gardener. I do not want to be a flower gardener. I love flowers, but it is not like my complete passion when it comes to gardening. I like to view growing flowers as just part of a more holistic pest management strategy, and because I love knowing that I am supporting native insects all around my garden, bringing in good insects that can help me pollinate my plants, that can help me eat up bad bugs, all good things to have. And as a bonus, in the meantime, I get flowers that I can either leave in my yard, or I can harvest seeds from to save, or I can dig up and share, or I can cut and put in bouquets. So for me, growing more flowers that are excellent hosts for beneficial insects and pollinators is a win-win-win-win situation. It's a bit early to tell, but I have a lot of pollinator plants in here. So I can see that a lot of my purple coneflowers are sprouting up. I've got hyacinths, which are definitely not native pollinator friendly plants, but they are some of the earliest bloomers in our area. So I want to focus on making sure that I've got something blooming at all times of the growing season. So from the earliest of the early to the latest of the late. For the earliest plants here, we've obviously got hyacinth, and I made a point of popping in new hyacinth bulbs all around my yard last fall. So I got like a 50-pack bulb package of pink and purple and white hyacinths, and I popped them all around my raised beds. I put them all in the front yard. I put them back here in our berry patch. And not only is it amazing to just see some green popping up this early in the season, but the blooms are just an extra added bonus. Another super early season bloomer, but also not a native plant that I added a bunch of up in the front here are Hellebores. And these are often referred to as Lenten roses. These will green up way faster than everything else in the yard. Like these were putting out beautiful new green leaves very early. And then some of these have had flowers open for about a week and a half now. Aren't these pretty little flowers? I haven't cut any of these because, as you can see, the plants are still pretty small. I just put these in last fall. Let's see, this one is a North Star pink hellebore, but I just love the super early blooms that these give. And I put these in after seeing how gorgeous my mom's hellebores looked in her front yard. And after seeing hers this year, I'm extra happy that I put more in our yard last fall because hers are like 4 times the size of mine. They are covered in blooms. So I think adding something like a hellebore will be a really good choice for areas where I want to bring in really early season pollinators that are just waking up for the season and looking for something to eat. My golden ragwort is also starting to bud up. It's looking very pretty and healthy very early on in the year. This is my best golden ragwort so far. Obviously I planted this last year because this one we put in this garden, but this is at the end of a gutter downspout extension. So I planted a lot of rain garden-y type plants here. I am looking forward to this spreading and filling this whole area with gorgeous flowers here soon. And then of course for early bloomers, we cannot leave out the gorgeous creeping phlox. I have a video all about how much I love creeping phlox, also referred to as moss phlox. This is a really, really gorgeous ground cover. So it will stay nice and lush and green, but it will only stay about this tall and it will spread out via runners on the bottom of its stems. You can kind of see here what I mean by that. So a really gorgeous ground cover that blooms super early. Now you can see the very starts of blooms right here, but soon this will be completely covered in blooms. I'll throw up a couple pictures of some of my moss phlox in bloom last spring. One of the earliest things to bloom, and I have some hot pink varieties that are really, really gorgeous. Once we get past the early season, I really just recommend anything that's beautiful and blooming and native where you live. I love coneflowers, black-eyed Susan, catmints. I love doing zinnias every year. That's an annual, but a super easy, gorgeous flower to have around the yard, especially for filling out spots where you're waiting for perennials to develop and you need something to just fill out some space or give you some color. I also love yarrow. I have the straight species white yarrow, but I also have a hot pink, a peach, a yellow, and a red all around the yard. Those spread really beautifully, and when they're not in bloom, you can see this one kind of popping back for the season right here. Now, some people consider yarrow a weed. I do not consider yarrow a weed. I think there's some sort of saying about it's only a weed if you don't want it where it's planted, and that's the truth. I love yarrow because it does spread and it's very drought hardy. So it's an excellent thing to have right here in an area where I don't want to water. I want this to spread and fill out a nice space here so that it can fill out some of the ground level around some of my taller plants that I'm going to be growing here, like this new elderberry shrub we put in last fall, which will get quite tall and be very pretty. And I have just a million other perennial and annual flowers that I like to grow. Anything that is going to attract beneficial insects with a focus on earlier plants and later plants, because you're not going to have a hard time finding things for mid-season. For late season, I love having goldenrod, which there are a ton of different varieties of goldenrod. If I could recommend one plant, native plant, it would be goldenrod. And if you don't have room for a larger goldenrod variety, there are plenty of cultivars of smaller miniature goldenrods that are really lovely. They're a super late bloomer, so they're really great for late season pollinators. And then Aster is another really great late season bloomer. I have an Aster, it's called Radon's Favorite. I have a couple of those around my yard. Super late blooming, will bloom through frost. Really gorgeous color in the end of the season. But if you get yourself some perennial Aster of any type really, that's going to be a reliable late bloomer for you in your garden for those late season pollinators. Our third goal is to continue establishing more perennial food supplies in the garden and to build out at least 2 of our perennial fruit tree guilds in the back of the yard. So I'm gonna set you guys down here, camera on a bucket. We are right behind our peach tree here. Our peach tree is our most mature fruit tree, and I am by no means an expert on fruit trees. Fruit trees are tough, you guys. You don't just buy a fruit tree and it grows without any help. You have to learn, of course, based on the tree and what its needs are. You have to learn about how to prune the tree, about when to spray the tree with different things. And we are not spraying with anything harsh. We are spraying with only organic approaches. So far, I have had to spray this multiple times with fungicide. And then we had an issue with a peach tree borer in it that I'm thinking the tree is rebounding from nicely. It was very stressed out. I had it buried too deeply in mulch. Just so many issues that I've encountered with this fruit tree. We are doing really great now, and I will also put up a book that I just read. It was a short book. I can't even remember where I saw it recommended, but it took me maybe an hour to read. I reread some parts of it, and I found it was very helpful, no nonsense, facts-based fruit tree care. So we are already starting to build out our fruit tree guild around the peach tree because it is our most mature tree. So when I say guild, that may be a new term to you if you are not super familiar with the permaculture world. So I love permaculture. I think it has some very interesting principles and some very helpful principles for gardening in a very sustainable way. One of the things that permaculture teaches you is to plant in what are called guilds. So when you think of a guild, you want to think of the different layers of growing in your garden. So the tree is going to be the center of the guild, and then around it you have other things. You have something that will attract pollinators. So right here I have a little yarrow plant, and then right over there in front of the camera I have a little coneflower that I dug up from elsewhere in the yard. So those are going to be our 2 major plants to attract beneficial insects. Of course, those are both native plants where I live as well. Then you want to have something that is going to be a nitrogen fixer in your soil. I love nitrogen fixers. I talk about them a lot. I hate spending money on things if I don't have to, and replenishing nitrogen is one of the main reasons we buy fertilizer. Obviously there are many different reasons, but nitrogen is so quickly depleted in the soil that if you can renew the nitrogen yourself, that's a great thing to do. If you plant nitrogen fixers around your fruit trees, at the end of the year, when those nitrogen fixers die off for the season, or you chop them down, whether they're perennial or annual, you leave those roots in place, it will release all of the nitrogen it's converted to your fruit tree. So it'll make for a happy, healthier fruit tree. I'm going to be putting some nitrogen fixers around this plant. I got a, don't quote me to this, I think it's a Shenandoah buckbean. I may be confusing different plants, but it's some sort of perennial bean. It looks a lot like a Baptista or a false indigo, except it has yellow flowers. It's like a shrubby plant. I'm gonna plant that right here behind the fruit tree. So we're gonna get this nice bushy area of plants with our yarrow, our buckbean, which is a nitrogen fixer, our coneflower over there. And then over here, I planted 5 different strawberry plants. And since these are on the ground, I'm going to let them run. And the goal with these is not necessarily to harvest berries, but it would be great if we could. The wildlife might get to them back here first, but it is to spread out and help shade out the roots around the tree. So I don't want anything that's going to have too deep of a root system over here. So strawberries have a very shallow root system, so they make a really good companion plant for things that have a deeper root system. The last thing that I'm going to be adding here, I'll show you guys, I already have one by our persimmon tree, is a comfrey plant. And comfrey is something that you need to be a little bit careful with, because if you don't get a comfrey that is sterile when it flowers and goes to seed, you will have a lot of comfrey everywhere. And you can ask my mother how she learned that, because she's got comfrey everywhere from letting her comfrey flower and go to seed. I got some sterile comfrey for some areas of my yard, and then some areas flower. This is a comfrey that is waking back up for the season. I really like this one because it doesn't get too big. It's more of like a spreader. So I got some of this from our Master Gardener plant sale last year. I saw it in our demonstration garden and I thought that is the comfrey I want. And I'm not even sure exactly what kind of comfrey it is, but the benefit of having the comfrey is that it does spread pretty prolifically, and it has a super deep taproot. So what that taproot's gonna do is go super deep down into the soil. It's going to break up and aerate the soil, which is amazing for soil. That's what you want. And it is going to bring up and accumulate lots of different nutrients in the soil. So that's great, brings them up to the surface. And at the end of the season, you do what's called a chop and drop with your comfrey. So you chop down all the leaves, and then you just spread them in your guild on your soil like you would a mulch, and you leave them in place to decompose. And over time, this has a really, really great effect on the health of your soil. So on that note, this is the second guild that I have started building out, and this is probably the guild that I will focus on when I'm done building out the peach guild. You can see our persimmon has not waken up for the season yet, and it is still much smaller than our peach tree. I have already planted a hellebore right here. That was a tiny, tiny little baby that I planted last fall, so no blooms this year, but that will be really great early season bloomer for back here. And then of course I've got the comfrey back here, and then I will put some sort of nitrogen fixer in here, and then some other solid pollinator like a black-eyed Susan or something like that. So this whole area where you see grass between these circles of dirt, and you also see all of these other circles, smaller circles of dirt here. These are blueberry bushes. This whole area is going to be sheet mulched and have paths put in this year. But once I am able to get in and put some newspaper and cardboard and wood chips down here to start smothering out that grass, I think that this is going to look like a really lovely area. Probably be a couple of years before it really starts to take off and start to be a more attractive part of the garden. But for now, I'm really happy with where this part is going, because we're able to establish these little islands of fruit. We've got our raspberries back here too. We've got gooseberries. There's so much I'm not even going to talk about today, because one, the video will be like 7 hours long, but 2, I haven't even started wrapping my mind around some parts of the yard. I have to keep reminding myself it is only late March now. Don't freak out. You have plenty of time. Enjoy it. Don't stress yourself out. So I will definitely look forward to updating you guys on how this area is going as I start to fill out those fruit tree guilds a little bit more. And one more thing before I wrap up this area. This is a Methley plum right here. This is probably our second oldest fruit tree. I pruned this one way down this year because I want to keep this one shorter. So I'm not going to be focusing on building these guilds out early in the season, but what I did was I kind of turned up that soil a little bit. I added a fresh layer of leaf compost, and then I sprinkled red crimson clover seeds all around the darker compost area that you see within the grass. And I did that for both of these plants. One, because I think that crimson clover is really beautiful, but also because it's a really excellent nitrogen fixer. Clover is a super fast plant to germinate, and you know, a lot of people don't want clover in their lawn. I think clover is wonderful, and once you are done with it for the season, you can just chop it down and use it as a green mulch. So until I'm focusing on the other fruit tree guilds, I'm just going to be planting some like clover nitrogen fixers around the base of the trees, so that I can start improving that soil a little bit until I get to completely working on like planning out what I'm going to plant around the trees. So I definitely recommend, if you have spots where you're interested in improving the soil but you just can't focus on it yet, just sprinkle something like a clover. You can get a big package of seeds, sprinkle it, just kind of lightly cover it. Don't even really have to water it, just like let Mother Nature do her thing. Leave those roots in the ground, and as it's dying off or just before it goes to seed, just chop it down and then put it right back on the ground to give it back to the soil. Our fourth thing that I'm going to be focusing on this year is replacing all of our store-bought herbs with garden herbs. So I already got a head start on this last year. I bought a dehydrator off of Facebook Marketplace and I like went crazy dehydrating stuff at the end of the season. So I dehydrated a ton of herbs and we've been using them all winter. So we're gonna look at some of my winter sowing here. This is not all of my winter sowing. This is kind of went a little crazy this year. Not as crazy as last year. I learned my lesson there, but I've got a lot of herbs in here. I've got catnip, I've got basil, I've got peppermint, spearmint, oregano, cilantro, all sorts of stuff. Some of these herbs will require succession planted, so I grow a ton of dill. I love having dill to make pickles, but I also love letting dill flower because it's a great attractant for beneficial insects. And then of course the swallowtail caterpillars love it and they will devour a dill plant. So I like to just sprinkle dill seeds all around the yard so that when it starts going to seed, I have another plant that is, you know, going to be producing our lovely dill ferns for a while. So that's one that I succession plant. Basil, I don't succession plant, but I keep it pruned down so it doesn't flower and go to seed. And then I have quite a few perennial herbs. I have a whole video on here about my favorite perennial herbs to grow in the garden, because if there's one thing I like, it's buying something and then never having to buy it again. I love buying a plant, I love propagating it, I love putting it elsewhere in my yard. This is a creeping thyme. You buy thyme once, you will never not have thyme. This has made it through the hardest of winters here in Maryland Zone 7. I have cut off from this plant so many times. I've got rosemary next to it. I've got a ton of perennial sage in my yard coming back beautifully this early in the season. More rosemary and thyme over here. And then I even have some perennial oregano in the yard. Oregano will go kind of nuts if you put it in the ground and let it ride. Not as crazy as mint. Don't put mint in the ground unless you want to have mint forever. I do not put mint in the ground other than like a perennial mountain mint type plant, but that's a whole different discussion for another day. I love mountain mint and it gets unnecessary slander because it has mint in the name. You can see the perennial oregano has a little bit different of a leaf shape than the oregano you may be used to growing. It has still just like the lovely taste. It dehydrates beautifully and then you can make little mixes out of it. And then I'm actually bringing you guys downstairs and switching it up a little bit to show you some of my other plants that I am growing pretty much specifically for dehydrating this year. So these are a lot of hot peppers. I have a lot of cayenne peppers in here. I have some Carolina Reaper peppers in here. I have some ghost peppers and I like using these to cook with, but I found last year that I had a really great experience just dehydrating the pepper whole after cutting off the stem and then grounding it up in a food processor and storing it. And I've been using these things all winter long. I use them for soups. I use them just for random cooking stuff, and they are so much more potent than the ones that you buy at the store. I make my own red pepper flakes now, and one of the things that I really want to do for Christmas gifts this year, I'm thinking way ahead, is I'm growing a ton of cayenne peppers so that I can make homemade red pepper flakes for all of the spice lovers in my life who would love getting that gift. And then for the extra spice lovers, maybe they'll get some Carolina Reaper hot pepper mix as well. I'm also starting a ton of seeds for calendula, for chamomile, for holy basil. My cousin had a bunch of seed packets from Strictly Medicinal Seeds. She gave me a bunch of different types. I've started all of those. And then I'm growing random things like borage and just herbs that I've never really grown before that I am looking forward to preserving and drying out and making teas with. So I don't want to have to be buying any of this. A lot of times, like I will go to a bulk herb store and buy like chamomile flowers to make teas with, which feels insane because chamomile is so easy to grow. So now I have one perennial chamomile plant outside and then I'm growing a ton of annual chamomile plants in my GreenStalk and all around my garden. Okay, and our fifth and last item that we are going to talk about this year for my 2026 garden goals is to get us to a point where I'm not buying any bagged soils. So that means bags of leaf compost, that means bags of potting soil. Obviously, if I'm going to like fill up another GreenStalk or something, I may have to buy like some soil amendments. I have a whole video in here about how to mix up your own lightweight potting soil, good for container gardening in things like the GreenStalk. But for like adding to my beds, for topping off my raised beds, for the in-ground beds, I currently have a whole pile of this bagged leaf compost. And granted, I didn't technically pay any money for this because I wait for Lowe's gift cards to go on sale in the Chase Ultimate Rewards portal, and then I cash in some credit card points, and then I use them to buy gardening stuff. So what I want to be doing is, through making my own compost and through planting more cover crops, getting better about planting cover crops, getting better about planting nitrogen fixers, getting to a point of where I'm not having to buy all of these bag soils, buying a ton of fertilizer, buying worm castings, all of that every year. So I'll show you guys what we currently have going on for our composting operation. So these are the bins that we filled up last year. This one was completely filled with leaves. And this one we actually filled 2 falls ago. If you like stick your finger down in there, which I'm not gonna do right now, but you can see like how composted and beautiful that is. So what I'm gonna be doing with this whole big pile here is putting it in the wheelbarrow and taking it over and laying it down on these grassy areas around our blueberry bushes and fruit trees before I add wood chips. So making a lot of our own leaf compost. The other 2 bins behind me are just full of yard waste that, you know, we let decompose over time. And if I'm filling up a new bed, I will dump that like half composted yard waste or sticks or whatever into the bottom of the bed before I put in dirt. I really like this one. I have it right behind our greenhouse here. I like it because the bottom opens, and we just started filling this one up so you can see what's in here is not like completely super composted, but this one is mostly for leaves and kitchen waste. So the ones in the back are mostly for yard waste. This one is mostly for kitchen waste. So this one can get a little bit stinky if I don't stay on top of adding in some browns and putting in too much food, but I like to keep them separate so I can kind of monitor what's going in, and they'll also compost at like vastly different rates if it's like lots of food in that one and only like breaking down yard waste in the back one. I'd say the most successful compost operation we had last year was the worm bucket here. So I saw people buying these online, so I took a food grade plastic bucket and drilled some holes in it, and the soil has settled a lot around here. It was like up to here last year. And then I would just put food scraps in it. And over time, I did add some worms, but the idea is that the worms over time will come in and out through all of the holes up and down the bucket, and on the bottom of the bucket, they will eat the food, they will poop, they will go back into the garden. So it's just kind of like a really hands-off composting system. And I don't love sacrificing the bed space, but this was so easy. I just threw stuff in there and like let the worms have at it, that I'm definitely going to keep this one here, and I may even consider adding smaller ones in some of my other beds. When I posted this recently on Instagram, it was seen by a lot of people, and one of the comments that I got over and over was like, microplastics in your beds, and it can be so exhausting sometimes. Like, I would like to not have lots of plastic, right? I would like that, but it just feels impossible sometimes to make the 100% ethical choice all the time. So if you guys have an idea for something that would work really well with this method, it's not a cardboard box, because people were telling me to use a cardboard box, but like that's gonna degrade over time. It's not going to be a long-term solution. I thought about stainless steel, I thought about like maybe an old like coffee container if it's metal, but I wasn't really coming up with a lot of long-term sustainable ideas. If you have any, let me know, because I would love to know. But in the meantime, the food grade plastic bucket's gonna have to do. And then in addition to this worm bucket, we also got a traditional vermicomposting tower that is currently in the basement. I'm gonna be moving it probably outside under the pergola this week. It needs to be in a covered area so it doesn't get too hot, and I just feed the worms like once a week. They are doing awesome. They eat like crazy, they poop like crazy, and they produce lots of that awesome worm poop that people pay lots of money for. So we have all of these things kind of worked into our routine that I am hoping will get us to a point of where we can stop being so reliant on buying compost and buying bagged soils and buying amendments and stuff like that. I'm already to a point of where the only fertilizer I'm really using is the liquid kelp. What is it called? Blue Planet Nutrients liquid kelp fertilizer, which I love. It's great. But behind me is our pond. And since we tripled the size of our pond, I can now go over to that pond, dump my watering can in, pick it up, and it's a nice like algae-ish, pond scummy-ish, fish poopy-ish water that is excellent for plants. Like, you want that pond scum for your plants. So hopefully at a certain point we'll be to a point where I won't even be having to buy those things, because I want to become less reliant on buying new things every year and making things my own way in our yard. We're not quite there, but getting much closer to that goal is on our list this year for this growing season. Okay guys, so that about wraps up what we are going to be focusing on for the 2026 growing season. Again, I don't want to stress myself out and like give myself weight goals for things and numbers for things. Instead, I just want to focus on having broad, practical, and sustainable goals for myself that will hopefully contribute to the overall health of the garden and give me a bountiful harvest in return. Let me know if you have any questions, and until my next video, happy planting.